There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Happy New Year, and here I am with my first Friday reads of 2024. I do have some personal news, and I hesitate to go into too many details because it's a bit personal, but I think you'll enjoy hearing the story and how it actually emerged from my reading life. As you know, if you've watched a few of my recent videos, one of my top reads of the year came very late in the year, or I should say I finished it very late in the year. Small Joys by Elvin James Mensah, and as I said, the two times I've talked about it in a couple of Friday reads ago, plus my besties and worsties, which went up this week. It's about a group of friends, gay and straight, mixed together, and the black gay protagonist, Harley, is having significant mental health struggles. And it's just about how that friend group is such a support and helps Harley to deal with stuff. And it's just heartwarming and beautifully written and a wonderful character-driven novel. I loved it, I loved it, I loved it. And as I was getting to the last few chapters and starting to get all the more and more emotional, it made me think very specifically about the friend group that I had when I was in university. I came out in my third year university, and in the first couple of years of university, and in that university is the University of Saskatchewan, here where I'm now back living in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. Over those first 2 years, I had fallen in love with 3 of my straight university friends of the male persuasion. And when I fell in love with the third one, I thought, Sean, I think it's time to deal with this. And it wasn't, that sounds really pat. Dealing with it involved a lot of emotional pain and a certain amount of courage. In the mid-1980s, I started to come out to friends, and I came out to 3 before certain events triggered a massive coming out to the whole group of friends. But there's 2 in particular that are important to this story. One is Chester, and he was the third straight friend that I fell in love with in those first couple of years, and he was gorgeous. He looked a bit like Elvis Stoico, but maybe cuter. And he was a big cuddly bear of a straight man, a young, very young man. I mean, I was 20 when I came out, so we would have been 19, 20 when I met him. And then through him, I met his best friend from his hometown, also a university student, Daryl. And there was a whole bunch of other people that I've talked about probably in other contexts. Gwen, who I do a lot of buddy reading with and is my bestie here in town again after all these years, was also an important part of that group. She was the third person I told. Daryl was the second, because Daryl was really open emotionally. You could talk to him about everything and blah, blah, blah. So he was one of my main supports, as was Gwen and one other guy, James. And as I was getting to the end of the story, and even though the dynamic between me and these male friends was quite different than Harley experienced, there was still an emotional dynamic and sense of group love and cohesion. Cohesion isn't the right word. Just a group dynamic that was an immense support to me at a very difficult time in my life. And so I was starting to think back on that. So the 2 names here are Chester and Daryl, and I tried to find those guys to invite them to my wedding when Kenji and I got married back in 2018, and I couldn't track them down. I'd lost touch with them since Daryl's wedding, which I believe was in the late 90s. Saw them both there, had a good visit, and then just kind of lost touch. For whatever reason, I didn't think to Google them again until I was on the closing chapters of Small Joys, and started with Chester, and I found out, shocked to discover that Chester had died. He was 54, and he died tragically. I won't get into it. It's not really my story to tell, to broadcast to the world, but he had actually died 2 months before I moved back to Saskatoon a year and a half ago. So that was a huge shock. And then I Googled Daryl, found an email address, sent him an email saying, I'm shocked to hear about Chester. I hope you're okay. It must have been terrible for you. They've been lifelong friends. It was terrible for me to get this news so suddenly and in such a weird way. And my friendship had been of a shorter duration, but had been quite an emotionally intense friendship, as I've already explained. And Daryl wrote back within 12 hours. He was so glad to hear from me, and we rekindled our friendship such that he lives in Calgary, and he came to visit me, and we spent New Year's Eve together. And just, like I say, rekindled a really, really close, intimate friendship. He's straight. Has always been straight. I have no doubt that he's straight, just like there was no doubt that Chester was straight. And to reconnect with him that deeply was just it was bittersweet because it was the news of Chester's death that brought us back together. And it was so beautiful, and it has just put me in such a grounded space. So I owe a lot to this wonderful novel, Small Joys by Elvin James Mensah. So that's my personal news. Like I say, bittersweet, but how lucky I am to have Daryl back in my life. Without further ado, here is this week's mystery guest. Well, I'm over the moon to introduce this week's mystery guest. This is the author of one of the best books I've read in 2023, Elvin James Mensah, the author of Small Joys, which I've been praising left, right, and center for the last few weeks. Joining us from southeast London. Elvin, what an honor to have you on my channel. Welcome.
Hello, Sean. Thank you so much for having me.
It's so great to meet you. So I knew as soon as I got to the closing chapters of this novel that I really wanted to interview Elvin about this book, and we're going to have a long form interview in a few days or a few weeks. And I didn't know how to get hold of him, but I tried a couple different ways, and he after the Christmas holidays presumably got those messages, and so here he is as my mystery guest for this week. So how were your holidays, Elvin?
They were okay. Let's just be honest. A little bit depressing. I spent because my deadline for the second book is basically in the next few weeks, and I hadn't been working on it as consistently as I should have, because essentially the publisher left me alone for a year and didn't bring it up at all until it got to the end of the year, and they were like, "Elvin, where is it?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, where is it? No one said anything." I used every single day in December to knock out 5,000 words every single day, and that means doing it over Christmas too. So I wasn't really in the holiday spirit. I was I woke up, had the Christmas dinner, opened the present, and straight back, just straight back to trying to get the second book done.
Your holiday sacrifice is going to be my Christmas present maybe next year. So thank you for doing that. What can you tell us about this novel? Maybe you don't want to tell us anything, but
I'm going to tell you, and you are going to be the first person I'm saying anything to. That's not
how wonderful.
My editor. So the second novel is going to be out next year, spring. And essentially what I was trying to do is, because in Small Joys, the main character, Harley, he's depressed, he's anxious, and he's a character that he relies a lot on his friends to help him go through his dark moments. And in the second book, I wanted to flip that and make the protagonist someone who people come to for help, who come to for guidance, who's kind of like almost like the patriarch of his friendship group. And the vibe I was going with, at least in the first draft, was kind of like Sex in the City, but with like 4 Black British male characters across the sexuality spectrum. And I wanted it to be more fun than Small Joys overall. I didn't want it to be as dark. In the first draft, it's not that anymore. It's gotten darker as the comments from the publisher, as I was discussing it with my editor. It's gotten a bit darker than I'd intended. But yeah, so that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted the vibe to be like. It's set in mid-2000s again. It takes place a year after Small Joys, but it's not necessarily. Some characters appear, but you can read it without reading it Small Joys. But if you have read Small Joys, there are Easter eggs in there that kind of like makes it that more exciting.
Easter eggs. That's wonderful. Oh boy, it sounds amazing. And when you said next year, just because I'm still thinking next year is 2024, you mean 2025?
I mean 2025, spring 2025.
I suppose I can wait that long. That sounds really, really interesting. We're going to have a long chat about Small Joys coming onto my channel later, but there were so many light moments and joyous moments in this. It just worked on so many different levels. That's all. And music was such a big part of Small Joys. So I have to ask you a couple questions about music. Do you listen to music while you are writing?
Yes, I do. I'm never not listening to music. It's funny because do you know the Spotify Wrapped stuff at the end of the year when yeah,
Yes, yes,
like
yes.
my stats are always absolutely insane. It's always like 100,000 plus minutes. I'm always listening, always listening to music because before I wanted to be a writer, I wanted to be a music journalist. So like I ran like a music blog for like a good like 10 years, and I thought that's where I wanted my life to go before I had a change of plans to actually well, I think I could write I could write a novel. So yeah, so the character in book 2 is actually going to be a music journalist. So I thought I could get my dream out some way or another. And oh yeah, and Muddy and Harley does study music
He
journalism
was,
too.
that's right.
It's always going to be in there somewhere.
Well, I looked up so many of the songs because a lot of it was new to me because I'm so old, but Lighthouse Family is not was something that their music meant a lot to me in the 90s when it was out. So, and then the next question about music is, do you listen to music when you're reading? And I'm going to guess the answer is yes.
I listen to film scores when I'm reading, so I can't have like if there's a vocal in it, I find that too distracting. So I listen to like very like sweeping film scores. So yeah, so not actual like songs, I guess. Yeah, like soundtracks.
I'm the same way. When I was younger, I could listen to any kind of music while I was reading, but now I can't. And I listen to classical piano music. Even other musical instruments will distract me. So
Mm,
yeah, I listen to classical piano. Is there anything else you would like to tell us about your writing these days, your writing life? You're working on the one novel, and it's
yes,
the first draft is finished or close to being finished.
close to being finished. I'm hoping to. I told them I was going to get it in the new year. That hasn't happened, but I'm hoping in the next few weeks I'll have something to submit. And I'm also working. So, do you know the character Muddy in Small Joys? He's getting
Yes.
when the paperback comes out in 4 months now, I think. He's getting a short story at the end of the book. So,
Oh,
a lot of the feedback I was getting, people seem to really like him. And I thought people would really appreciate having like a section just from his perspective and kind of like tying up his story. That takes place a couple months after the story ends. So if you're an American that's read it, I apologize because I submitted the idea to my publisher way too late. So it's not going to be included in the American paperback, but I think it might be in the digital version. But in the UK, it's going to be at the back in the end pages of the paperback, Muddy's little short story. So that's what
great. Well,
yeah.
I'm really eager to read that. So you've written some musical journalism. You're a fiction writer. Is there any other form that you'd like to try, or you are also doing?
Um, yes, but this there's so many. I'm not allowed to say anything, but it's so exciting. So I'm trying to get into script writing, writing screenplays, and I guess I should leave it there. I guess I can tell you
Okay,
afterwards. Everything.
sure. And when you're able to talk about it, please come back and tell us about it because that sounds
Yeah,
the one of the many strengths of Small Joys was the dialogue. So I can see that totally. So
I can't wait to tell you. It's so exciting, Sean.
great.
It's
So let's shift and talk about what you've been reading recently.
yes. One of my favorite books I read last year was Family Meal by Bryan Washington. I absolutely, I love him so much. And when he one like my highlights of 2023 was when he sent in the quote for my book because when they said they were going to reach out to him and ask him to quote for it, I didn't think anything was going to come of it. And then and it wasn't glamorous at all. I was sitting on the toilet one day, and then my phone vibrated, and then then it was like, "Hey, look what Brian Watchman said about your book," and it was just the most amazing thing. So yeah, then I got sent a proof of Family Meal, and I read it in like 2 days, and it was I just absolutely amazing. But so that was one of my favorite books of last year.
I don't think I've read him his
Yeah,
second novel,
second, yeah. So the first novel was Memorial.
Memorial. Okay. Well, that's a great recommendation. Why did you like it so much? What did you like about it?
First of all, writing is just absolutely beautiful, and every time I read a book, it's always character first for me. So like, I don't necessarily care where if it's where the plot goes, or even if there is a plot, just as long as it's a character that I can understand, a character that I can like sink my teeth into. Like, you're giving me thoughts, you're giving me feelings, you're giving me motivation, and that's exactly what he does. And because he's a queer black writer, like there's always going to be a connection there. he's talking about it's like mental health, relationships, things to do with anxiety surrounding food, which is all stuff I can relate to. So it really like it was like sometimes you read a book and you think this book was made for me or written for me. And that was the kind of experience I had with that.
I'm gonna have to check it out. What
Please
else? Yeah, what else have you been reading?
let me try and remember. Do you let me look at
Oh
my
yeah,
shelf? It's just
please take your time. Yeah.
what did I read last year? Oh, do you know the author Dolly Alderton? I know she's quite big in the UK, but I don't know if she's
Yes,
if
the name. I haven't read her, but I certainly am aware of her stuff.
she has a new novel out called Good Material, and that was one of my most anticipated novels. Before she was an author, she does like podcasts, and she's like a real like internet personality. She's just so glamorous and fabulous. I love her, and her first novel was called Ghosts, and that was one of my favorite novels of the year I read it in. So her second novel was one of my most anticipated. It's about this couple that goes through a breakup, but you're seeing it from both sides and what led to it. Very simple premise, but she just has a way of just making it so compelling, and I absolutely adore her.
She is also British, right? Have you ever met her?
No, but she's really close friends with another author called Monica Heisey. Have you heard of her? She wrote a novel called Really Good, actually, which was like it
Oh,
was a
oh,
massive
yes, yes,
bestseller.
yes.
Yeah, it
I've
was a
heard of
massive
it.
bestseller. Yeah, here I did an event with Monica, she's friends with Dolly. So I haven't met Dolly, but I've met one of her closest friends.
Well, so you've got an in to meet her someday. Here's a question. I don't think anybody needs to read any other book before they read Small Joys by Alvin James Mensah. But if there was a book that people might read that would kind of get them in the right headspace and heart space for Small Joys, what would it be?
Very specific answer for this one. So, and it's probably maybe controversial. I'm not sure. A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara.
Oh, okay.
It it's one of my favorite books ever, and it's one of those books where I read it 2015, and literally there's not really a day goes by where I don't talk about it. It's really strange, and the reason that I say that because I think in Small Joys the relationship between Harley and Muddy is like it's really tender. It's really kind of like they go through really dark moments together, and it's not as like brutal as A Little Life, but in A Little
Definitely
Life,
not.
in A Little Life, the relationship between Jude and Willem, it's I feel like it's kind of like I was kind of drawing off that a little bit. They have that kind of like tender relationship, and they go through like so much, and it's so fraught, but there's such a closeness there. And so yeah, I feel like if you liked A Little Life, maybe there's a chance you understand where I'm coming from with Small Joys.
A Little Life is definitely a Marmite book.
I know it's very controversial out there.
I haven't read it. I feel like I don't need to read it because I've heard so much about it. But someday, especially upon your recommendation, I should reconsider giving it a try one of these days. And yes, character driven. I'm a character driven reader. That's what I value above all else, and that's why I love Small Joys so deeply. Do you have any? Let's close with this question, maybe. Who are some of the authors that are the best character writers besides Alvin James Mensah?
Oh, you are so sweet. I think one of my favorite authors, we don't have to talk about Hanya Yanagihara again, but one of the reasons why I wanted to write a book in the first place like, when I was late teens was because I read We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver, because that would have been the first adult novel that I'd read. Because before that, I was very much into kids' books, YA. So, and we had to do like an exam on it at school, and so that was the first adult book I read, and I was so fascinated by so many things she did with it. So, because it's written in the epistolary form, just like a series of letters. And at the time, so I didn't know books could be written like that. So that kind of blew my mind. And she's so like intrinsic with how she makes you understand these characters, even though they're not the best people. You still understand them. You still get where they're coming from. And I absolutely love that when you can make a character who, on the surface, is so unlikable, has done horrible things, you can still see why they might have done or where they're coming from. So in my head, in this moment, I'm going to say Lionel Shriver. I really do like that, love her.
Well, there was another book that I didn't think I'd ever read, so you're really opening up a whole bunch of stuff for me, which is just wonderful. Elvin, I'm going to say I could talk to you for hours, and we're going to talk, maybe not for hours, but we're going to talk for hopefully an hour about Small Joys coming up. We'll set that up after this. But what a delight to meet you. Thank you so much.
Oh my God, thank you for having me. Thank you for reviewing my book and featuring it on your channel. It means a lot.
I'm going to be evangelizing about it from here on in.
I adore you. Thank you so much.
Well, that was serendipitous that I got a message from Elvin just the other day, and he's the mystery guest for this week. Can't wait to talk to him at length about Small Joys, and you'll be seeing that chat fairly soon. Oh, I haven't even introduced my new blouse. Santa was really good to me. There was a note in my Christmas card from Santa this year that I was going to get 2 new pair of jeans, and when Santa, i.e. Mom, took me shopping this week, or no, it was last week, because of certain sales going on and certain generosity of Santa, I came home with 3 pair of pants and 2 new blouses. So this is the first one that I'm debuting, and there'll be another one next Friday. So I love it. All right, here's the week in review. This one is coming out in February, and it is a return to an autobiographically queer story. Well, that's absolutely all I need to know about an Edward Louis novel, because I just love his queer fiction. He's just one of my very most favorite gay male writers writing today. Next is my favorite character, and hands down, that is the protagonist, Ed Beach, from the Stromness Dinner. So I already warned you I was going to be talking about him again. I think he's in his late 20s. Straight guy, works with his dad on home renovation, and he's a foodie. He's not particularly articulate. And it's a first-person voice on the page. And his personality, he is so adorable in a way that just captured my heart. That just think about him all the time. Some places I've seen online categorize it as YA, but we're just going to ignore that. If I like it, it's not YA. My goodness, I don't read YA. It's literary fiction, but it sounds really interesting. It won the Writers' Trust of Canada Rising Star Award the year it was published. All right, I've had a really good reading week. I don't have much to tell you because I haven't finished anything, but this was a week where I just kind of needed to dabble. I had one buddy read where I had to read. I had one buddy read that I had to stay on track with, but other than that, I just kind of dabbled, and I picked up some books that I haven't picked up in months. That was fun, and have just been, reading quite widely among the 39 books I'm still currently reading. And that was great. I hope to finish up some stuff for next week, because there are various reading commitments I've made in January and going into February, so I got to clear some space. But this week was not about that. This was just about luxuriating in all the things that I read. So it's nice to have a week like that every once in a while. So today I have 2 books that I've recently started to tell you about, because I'm far enough in to do so. And I'm just going to show you 3 books I'm going to be starting this week, despite not having finished anything. 2024 is off to a great start. I'm halfway through this novella, Night, by Edna O'Brien. This is a buddy read with Sonia of An Enthusiastic Reader. What can I say about it? The writing is beautiful. It's Edna O'Brien. The writing is always beautiful. I have almost half a page of vocabulary for future episodes of In Other Words, but I'm not enjoying it. I don't like it really very much. It is a stream of consciousness about an unhinged woman, it says on the back. Maybe unhinged, certainly a nonconformist, independent. Her name is Mary Hooligan, and she's a hooligan. And she's lying in bed thinking of her life. She's house-sitting, and I'm not sure what the point of it is. There's a bit of story, but I don't really like. It kind of reminds me of Duck's Newburyport, which I didn't like and didn't finish. I'm going to finish this because I'm half done. It's 150 pages, but if I was getting more invested in her character, that would keep me going, but I'm not. I don't really like her, or I don't even know if it's that I don't like her. I don't really feel I'm getting to know her. That may change in the second half, but I would say for this particular Edna O'Brien, Oh, that fucking snowblower's coming back. Are you kidding me? Well, it's a good thing I'm almost finished because the snowblowers are driving me crazy. We have snow today. I should show you what it looks like out the window. It's the first kind of heavy snowfall of the year. Of the season. But the snowblower's so loud, and with my new mic, my other mic didn't seem to pick up noises around as much as this one does, and it's just been driving me nuts. It's part of the reason I'm starting as late as I am this morning. It's almost noon because I was waiting for the goddamn snow blowing machine, the ones that they just carry around on their back or whatever. So annoying. I'm not offering to go out and use a shovel myself, am I? But I can't stand that noise. I'm getting more sensitive to noise as I get older, actually. Anyhow, I'm not loving this, but it's not entirely a waste of time. Getting some good vocabulary. Her sentences are gorgeous. This next one is going much better so far, and that is this collection of Japanese short stories, Toddler-Hunting and Other Stories by Kōno Taeko. I had kind of made a policy change a year or more ago that I was going to do the Asian order. Never mind what it's written on the cover. Family name first, given name second. So Kōno Taeko, and this is translated. It's got two translators named Lucy, which is pretty interesting. Lucy North, and then maybe only one story because it says with an additional translation by Lucy Lower. And I've read the first story, and it's one of the most fascinating short stories I've read. It was written in 1963. The English title is Night Journey. Yoru Oyuku is the Japanese title. And, oh my god, I loved it. I mean, it was kind of dark, which I kind of liked. It's kind of hentai. And so, Kōno Taeko, she died as an old woman in 2015. I'm surprised at how hentai is the Japanese word for kind of perverted, or usually has a sexually deviant meaning. It's one of my favorite words in Japanese. Yeah, she was 88 when she died in 2015, and I had never really heard of her other than this book. And for some reason, the cover of this put me off because I assumed, because that's an ancient photograph on the cover, like maybe 100 or more years old, that I thought the stories were written and or set that far back in Japanese history, and I'm interested in that era of Japanese history, 19th century or very early 20th, but there was something that I just thought, this is not a book I need to read anytime soon, so it's been languishing on my shelves until Dan of the Weird Book Club suggested it on a list of other Japanese books that he'd be interested in having a pseudo-buddy read with, so I picked it because I have it on the shelf, and I've now read the first story, and I just found it absolutely fascinating. It's about two young married couples in the early years after World War II. I don't know which Japanese city, but it's obviously an urban setting. Apparently none of these stories have a identifiable setting where it is in Japan, but certainly urban. And the two women were childhood friends, and then they both get married, and there's a complicated story about the more newlywed of the two couples, because I'm not going to try to explain it, because otherwise I'm going to have to start using characters' names, and that's just confusing to people, to y'all, if you haven't read the story. But there's a bit of a sexual curiosity between the two couples, and they almost do a wife swap one night and chicken out, and then they laugh about it the next time they get together, because they're really a close friendship between the two couples. So they joke about it, and then one man or one couple dares the other to actually, let's do it, and they set a date. And as the story opens, the one couple has decided that the other couple is not going to show up, so they decide to go and pay them a visit. And then the story goes from there. I don't mean to imply that it's a graphically sexual story, but it's certainly a very fascinating psychological look at desire, and the point of view is from one of the women, and you really get a sense through this story, and apparently through all the stories, about how horrifically misogynist Japanese culture is and how unhappy most Japanese women are with their lot in life. And that is underneath all of the other things that happen in this story. But it didn't feel, there was something about it that didn't feel like a Japanese story. It felt like more like a Western story. Like it felt more like a John Cheever story or Edward Albee. Like it had kind of a Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf kind of vibe. It was just absolutely fascinating. I can't wait to keep reading it. So now I'm going to start 3. 2 of them are buddy reads, and I had no business adding a third, but I'm just going to throw caution to the wind and add that third because I'm dying to read more by that author. Stay tuned. So this will be my first buddy read of the year with Jo Smith. We are going to read her first, I would say, full-length novel, Anukrti Upadhyay's Kintsugi, which has obviously a Japanese theme. I can't remember how much of the story happens in Japan, but obviously part of it does, or there's an aspect of Japanese culture that is involved. It was published in India in 2020. I have read 2 novellas by Anukrti, Daura and Bhaunri, both of which I loved. And Anukrti Upadhyay has been on my channel for a bite-sized book chat. And, you know, she follows my channel, at least occasionally. And once I've read this, I'm probably going to be ready to have an author chat with her as well. Jo has also read those 2 same novellas and loved them, so we are going to buddy read this one. Kintsugi, if you didn't know, is the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery, and so they patch it up together with gold. They glue it with gold glue. I'm not sure more than that, but there'll probably be quite a bit about that in this book. And the philosophy behind it is about that we're all broken, and it shouldn't disguise the breakage, but to make it part of the beauty of the object. I'll put a couple examples on the screen so you know, you can visualize what I'm talking about. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Anukrti Upadhyay, one of my very most favorite writers, is going to do with this theme. And my first buddy read of the year with Heidi of my reading life is going to be a deaf horror novel. This is Apparitions by Adam Pottle. If you were around for the second half of, or even the last quarter of 2023, I talked about Adam Pottle quite a lot. He launched this novel in the fall last year. I went to the book launch. Heidi and I buddy read his kind of memoir about being a deaf writer, which is called Voice, which we both thought was quite amazing. So even though neither Heidi nor I are much into horror, we're going to buddy read this together. What he read from it, he read the opening and then he read a few other excerpts, and it did sound fascinating and certainly well written. The premise is that a deaf teenager has been kept prisoner in his father's basement for his whole life and then escapes. And then I think there's themes of vengeance and so on. And apparently it's based on documented cases where parents of deaf children have done this, which is quite horrific. And Adam Pottle is fascinating, and I already have arranged that I'll be talking to him about this book and about his other writing once I've read it. So stay tuned for that. No idea what to expect. I'll have some more to say probably next week. And finally, I can't hold off any longer to read another book by the British novelist Peter Benson, because of how much I loved his novel that I read almost exactly a year ago, The Stromness Dinner. It was also in my top 5 reads of 2023. I just saw that Priscilla of Evening Reader had it on her favorite books of the year, and I just can't wait any longer. So I'm just gonna squish it into my current reads because so this is the very next novel he published. Kidnap Fury of the Smoking Lovers. Talk about an enigmatic title. No idea what that means. The protagonist is a 20-year-old gardener, a man, and that's all I need to know. I'll tell you more about it later, but I can't put it off a moment longer. All right, so that's all very exciting stuff. I hope there's lots of exciting stuff going on in your world, reading-wise or otherwise. If you'd like to tell me about it, you know what to do. Thanks for watching.